Hello, you've tuned to this week's episode of Next Steps Forward, and I'm your host, Chris Meek. As always, it's an honor to have you with us. Next Steps Forward is committed to helping others achieve more than ever while experiencing greater personal empowerment and well-being. Our special guest today is Brittany Dunn. Brittany is Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Safe House Project, a national leader working to eradicate human trafficking in the United States. Prior to Safe House Project, she spent 10 years in international business development at careerbuilder.com. Brittany was with us in October 2022. It's been that long?
It's been that long. We've been friends
Holy cow.
3 years.
I got that Facebook pop-up message. We've been friends for that long. Brittany, it's great to have you with us again today. Brittany, welcome back to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I mean, we've got a lot to cover. A lot has happened since we last had you on the show. But there's so much more to your life story and accomplishments than what I mentioned in the introduction. Fill in the blanks for us.
Oh, goodness. There are so many different pieces of our story, but I think where I have the privilege of really being at this point in my life is that I am a mom of two incredible kids, which is the greatest joy. Obviously, CEO of Safe House Project, a military spouse, and really a defender of the vulnerable. Every day I get to wake up and be on the hope side of a really dark and challenging issue, but one that brings a lot of joy when we see the miracles that happen.
You know, it was interesting that last sentence you just said, so we'll go off script for a little bit here. You said you talk about the darkness that you're working with, but then you're smiling at the same time and saying you see the joy. This is a really, really heavy topic. And it was something that I knew nothing about before I started this podcast. You know, you hear about it, you see on the news, not in my neighborhood, it's not going to happen here. And it really opened my eyes. And it's something that I've really made a huge focus of the show about, which is why we're having you back on. We've had Christy on. It's something that is one of the top issues I talk about. You know, why is it something that nobody really talks about or doesn't think it can happen in their neighborhood? And then maybe part two of that is, you're still smiling as I'm talking about how dark this is. It's a difficult thing to do day in, day out, yet you're smiling and you love your work.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, human trafficking has woven itself into the very fabric of our communities. For so long, it has become this hidden epidemic that we didn't fully understand. And you cannot fight an enemy that you don't know. And I feel like we're at this pivotal moment in the trajectory of combating human trafficking where people are starting to wake up and they're starting to understand that this is a reality for hundreds of thousands of American kids every single year, a million more adults. And I think it is through that increased awareness and education that we can really start to unpack this issue and start to really find those targeted interventions to go after it. To the question of joy and how do I have joy in this work, I truly believe that what you tolerate, you give permission to exist. And when we tolerate that children are being exploited in our communities, we're allowing that evil to take root. And that comes through in a wide variety of areas, not just in trafficking. It permeates public safety. It comes through in our schools, in our places of worship, in our communities. And so for me, it is a joy to wake up and get to use the gifts that I've been given for service and to dedicate my life and my calling to really tackle some of the most complex issues. And when you do that, you get to see a lot of system failures, you get to see a lot of evil, you see a lot of breakdown, but then you get to see where solutions can enter in and where innovation can help drive forward new opportunities. And I think obstacles are always possibilities. And where we see an obstacle, we lean in and we say, not on our watch. And we push forward and we say, how are we going to get the job done? And then we get to see survivors rescued. We get to see them heal and we get to be part of their story post-exploitation. And there is so much beauty when somebody has experienced the worst of humanity to watch them also see the absolute best in humanity.
We're going to talk about innovation in a minute, which you just mentioned. And I want to highlight, you mentioned the word survivor. These people are not victims. These are survivors. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But you mentioned you see this in places of worship. You see this in schools. There was a major sting. It's about 2-ish years ago now. And I remember it was in March because they called the Operation March Sadness because it's right around the time of March Madness for the basketball tournament.
Yeah.
And it was in Florida. And I think the number was 33 people were arrested as part of this major national sting. And it included high school teachers, coaches, priests, everybody you trust your child with on a daily basis, Little League baseball, basketball, teachers, whoever, Boy Scout leaders, Girl Scout leaders, whatever it is. And so I just want to nail down the point, hammer it home. It does happen in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
I had a guest on a few years ago, this young woman, she was from Naples, Florida, very affluent town. Her best friend's father trafficked her through all the other dads in their community in Naples. And she was terrified to say anything. And I can't imagine being that young woman and you've got all your friends from high school. And when you go to your girlfriend's house after school for pizza on Friday night and watch a movie, and there's the dad across the kitchen. You know, how do these young women, how do they cope with that? How do they, and young men as well, it happens to the boys and men as, you know, teenagers as well, male teenagers. You know, how does somebody just cope with that and deal with that? You know, they're not being trafficked as a traditional sense in terms of you're put in the white van with no windows and you go to the hotel here and you go to a hotel there. How does somebody deal with that?
Yeah, I think that what we have to understand around human trafficking is it's a really complex interpersonal crime, and it impacts people in a wide variety of ways. And that is why it's so important that we recognize that those relationships may be people that should be really close to them. We see over 40% of child trafficking victims first trafficked by family members. As you mentioned, the dad was the trafficker. And so these individuals are right there in our community. They are close to our kids, and they're close to, the entire network that they're utilizing to perpetrate this crime. And so when a survivor is recovered, so much of what they are looking for is that sense of belonging, that sense of safety, both physical and psychological safety. And so that oftentimes can't happen in the traditional family unit. And so how do we create pathways for them to realize that healing and step into the freedom free of exploitation, while honoring that they're going to need that support around them in order to really feel stabilized and realize that their ultimate goals.
So, as I mentioned, this is obviously a very heavy topic. Let's make it lighter for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
What's your dog's name?
I don't have a dog.
I hear a dog barking. It's not mine.
I don't have a dog. I thought it was your dog.
No, it's usually Zeke, but it's not Zeke because he's asleep under my feet right now.
Nope, I have no dog.
Wow. Okay. Maybe I'm hearing the neighbor's dog.
I was hearing a dog. I thought it was your dog.
No, he's asleep right there. Okay, it's not Zeke. Zeke, you're not grounded today. So that's odd. That's really weird. Okay, I thought it was yours. Sorry.
No, I'm waiting for somebody to go behind you.
Yeah,
now.
Exactly. No,
bring back our 2020 vibes.
He's right. Yeah, exactly. He's right by my feet. So I want to apologize for looking away for a minute ago because I wanted to Google. I literally just Googled human trafficking and clicked on news. And you can't go, you know, I'm looking at on page 1, 11 different stories in 11 different areas. There's nothing that's the same here. And it's not all the US. Here, I see a Canadian story here, Pittsburgh, New York, BBC, Delaware, Cleveland, people.com, of course, Epstein, which has been taking the airwaves for years now. You know, and I looked at that because, you know, the statistics about human trafficking are as mind-boggling as they are obviously disturbing. Organizations like Safe House Project note that hundreds of thousands of people are trafficked in this country every year, including many who are exploited through the commercial sex industry, which I believe is the highest revenue grossing illegal business in the world, for lack of a better word. But only 1% of them are ever identified. Help us understand those numbers. You know, how do we know the number of trafficked people is that large when such a small number are identified?
Great question. And I do think we have to acknowledge that this is a legal industry. And so with any criminal enterprise, we're estimating those prevalence numbers. But what we have seen is year over year, the online enticement reports that are coming in through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children continue to rise. The amount of revenue that is being generated on the web and dark and black markets, we see the exchange of people. And so there are ways to estimate these numbers, even if they are that estimates. What I can tell you is that our staff has seen just exponential growth. When we launched in 2017, it was really unusual to even have people understand what trafficking is. And we had to do a lot of explaining that this wasn't human smuggling. To your point, it's not the white panel van that we're concerned about. And reframing that conversation took many years. But now we're at a point where people have really started to, for better or worse, because of things like Epstein and Diddy, they've opened their eyes to this issue. And through that, we're seeing more reports of suspected trafficking. We're seeing more individuals identified. Last year, our team had the opportunity to serve 1,529 victims of human trafficking as they exited exploitation and helped get them into safe house programs. And this year, we will hit just shy of 3,000 victims. And when you see that almost 2 times rate every single year, and match it with just the increased number of signals coming in from community, you start to realize that we are only at the beginning stages of really understanding this crime. And so for the amount of money that we can tell is flowing through my financial institutions, mapped back to the low number of identification rates, it's very easy to correlate that data and start to see that we're really at a very minimal number of people being identified compared to where we have to end up.
A moment ago, when I was talking about the young woman in Naples being trafficked by a friend's father, and part of your response, you mentioned how people are trafficked by family members. Mm-hmm. How is that possible? What goes through somebody's mind as a family member? This crisis, I'll call it because it is a crisis, was first brought to my attention. One of my first guests on the show was a woman who was trafficked by her family at the age of 6 months to the age of 16. 6 months old. I mean, I can't say on the air, no matter whether you're, sanctioned or not, I can't say the words that I think should happen to that family. Right. But what kind of a person do you have to be to traffic a family member? And I don't know if there's an answer for that or not.
I can't wrap my mind around it. To that case, we see those cases every single day, and we see these kids who are literally born into a life of human trafficking. And the power dynamics and the generational impact of this crime is just continuing to grow. But you look at that within the larger context that 1 in 4 girls will experience sexual abuse before the age of 18, 1 in 9 boys. Just even those early child sexual abuse interactions predisposes people to be vulnerable to human trafficking. And so when we are shattering an individual's idea of boundaries and what normal, healthy interaction looks like at extremely young ages, we're creating a culture where this thrives. And I think that's what's so alarming. So much of even yes, we have the 40, 50% who are being trafficked by family members, but a huge part of this spike is that in 2015, everybody started to get a smartphone and you could record it almost instantaneously. So it took a lot of that child sexual abuse that has always been as part of our community, unfortunately, and allowed them to start monetizing, allowed them to instantaneously list these kids for profit. And just the spike and exponential growth of this as a result of a tool being weaponized for evil, it's just propagated the crime in ways that I don't think we fully ever could have comprehended at that time.
So you just gave us that 1 in 4 young women prior to the age of 18 will be sexually harassed.
Mm-hmm. And 1 in 9 boys.
As a father of 2 daughters, that's very troubling. Mm-hmm. So we need to get the word out there to parents who have their head in the sand, like I did 5 years ago before the show. Mind-boggling stats. And so we're going to get more into that. Maybe on the other side of us, help us to understand the situation of people who are being trafficked, and again, especially children. a lot of people can't understand why the victims don't simply reach out for help or leave their traffickers. Please talk about the emotional, the psychological, and the situational barriers that help, keep victims trapped.
Yeah, when we're thinking about this, I think that for a long time we expect it to look like extreme physical abuse. And really, this is a crime of mental coercion. It is what we've historically known as Stockholm syndrome, but now called trauma bonding. And so it's a complex interpersonal relationship where the victim really starts to identify with that trafficker or as their keeper, as somebody who might be keeping them safe. When we're looking at some of these kids, if they've escaped an abusive household or left been removed from their home and placed in foster care, sometimes this is the first person who tells them that they're loved, that they're seen. And it's easy to prey on somebody's vulnerability when there's such an emotional void that exists in their life. And so they come in and they seek to meet that and fill that emotional void and create that attachment prior to even entering in with the layers of abuse that then somebody will experience. One of the survivors that we work with always states it so well. She's like, if you were to put a frog into boiling water, the frog's going to jump right back out. But if you put a frog into cold water and start to turn up the heat over time, they don't even realize that they're being boiled before it gets to the high temperatures. And that's really a great analogy to how traffickers groom and create this very complex layered relationship with their victim that makes it even more difficult for somebody to maybe recognize the situation and subsequently ask for the support.
Well, and to the point of recognizing the situation from a very, very basic perspective, what are the signs of human trafficking? And are there ways that ordinary citizens can possibly spot someone who is a trafficker or being trafficked and help out?
Yeah. So I think the important thing to note is that there are 25 unique business models to human trafficking. And so understanding which type of victim you might be most likely to intersect is important. So we do a lot of training through our On Watch training, which is a free 1 hour training that you can take that breaks down trafficking into these different profiles and gives you signs and indicators that align to different types of situations. But in general, we are oftentimes looking for somebody who is dissociative or aloof in a public setting. They aren't really present. You might see inappropriate clothing for the time of year or age, presence of multiple cell phones, being fearful of the person that we're with, that child is with, like just watching those interpersonal dynamics. Those are just some of the basic things. We also see a higher rate of truancy if it is a child still in school. Or we might see, if we have a really stable child, all of a sudden a huge drop in grades or really starting to distance themselves from any of the protective factors that they had around them before that kind of relationship entered into their life.
And as this crisis has gotten more attention, has human trafficking gotten worse in recent years, or are we simply just more aware of it because of that publication?
I think that's a both and. I don't think, unfortunately, we're at the point where community education has really peaked and hit that critical mass for us to be on the downward slope of really decreasing the rate of victimization. I think that we obviously have seen a strengthening in public awareness and public campaigns, but we need to translate awareness into action. And a lot of that is helping people understand how they can be part of identifying and reporting suspected trafficking where they live, work, and play. And I think we're still getting there. I think people have an understanding, but they still feel extremely hesitant because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be nosy. They might have their own perceptions of what happens when they report something over to law enforcement. Whatever the barrier is, there's still a lot of those that exist in community-based reporting. Until we can break through that and help really mobilize people to increase identification rates, it's going to be hard to curtail this. I think the other side of that is that this is still a low risk, high reward crime for the perpetrators. And so we have to come along with stronger legislation that really seeks to prosecute traffickers and buyers to the full extent of the law, in my opinion, and make sure that we are decreasing any sort of acceptance that we can plead these things away and that there weren't people on the other end of that crime.
In my opinion, too, I agree with you. And as a follow up to that, we mentioned earlier, only 1% of trafficking victims are identified, and you mentioned policy.
Mm-hmm.
Does that small number mean law enforcement isn't doing its job, that policymakers aren't devoting enough resources to the issue, that the public isn't doing its job, or all of the above?
All of the above. And I say that with all of the humility and appreciation for those who are doing the work. But human trafficking was outlawed in the United States in 2000 through the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. So there is a lot of grace to understanding that we are 25 years in to solving an issue that has existed since the beginning of humanity. And so with that said, we have a lot of work to do. We have to equip more of our law enforcement to take a victim-centered approach to engagements with potential victims. We have to strengthen our protection around survivors. We have to increase our training and education for frontline response. And I think when we do that and we start to strengthen the overall identification rates, when we start to see a larger slice of the issue, then what we're going to be able to do is also articulate our business case to policymakers, to donors, to private citizens about why there needs to be an increased investment into this issue. But you have to come alongside with the sound data, with the data-driven decision-making, as well as what is the, I hate to say return on investment, but return on impact, let's say, for those invested dollars into this issue, because there are a lot of things pulling funding right now. And so we need to make sure we're taking a scalpel to the problem and not a hammer in order to make sure we get to the most effective interventions.
A scalpel to the problem. I like that. It's very, the precision there to really cut out the cancer, for lack of a better phrase. In the law you mentioned, that's a federal law, correct?
Correct.
But for the laws that affect the traffickers, those are state laws, correct?
Individuals can be prosecuted at both the state and federal level. So we do federally prosecute federal cases against traffickers, but the state laws are equally or more important because things don't always bubble up to being a federal level case if it doesn't have multi-state jurisdiction. So we absolutely need to strengthen our state level policies. And I mean, most people, I'm in Virginia. Virginia did not put code on the books to prosecute sex trafficking until 2015, and labor trafficking only got legislative code in 2024. And so just even recognizing that the states are still coming along to really strengthen their code to really tackle this issue systematically is a really important lens by which to view the problem and the solution.
So again, going off script, which one of my producers, Eric, hates me doing, let's stick with the policy conversation a little bit. I know that you and our mutual friend and your co-founder, Christy, have been doing a lot of work with the state attorneys generals. Mm-hmm. And actually, I know that Christy is meeting with our attorney general's office here in the great state of Connecticut in about an hour and a half today. Tell us the work that you're doing and why is it important to go state by state and working with those attorneys general?
Yes. So Safe House Project has really been able to come alongside and serve, as I mentioned, over almost 3,000 victims of human trafficking this year. But over the past few years, we have seen a real need to bring new solutions to the trafficking space on victim identification and reporting. And so by doing that, we brought a bunch of experts together and created a new platform called Simply Report. And what Simply Report is it's an AI-based reporting mechanism that can be downloaded via app, phone, or web-based. But as you as a concerned citizen come on and just speak to some of the signs and indicators that you might be seeing, it's going to draw out additional information. And as it validates that what you're seeing may be suspected trafficking, it will route that information to law enforcement within 10 seconds. So it's providing real-time actionable intelligence to our law enforcement partners in a way that allows them to prioritize their caseload and really increase our response to trafficking in our communities. Why this is so critical at the state level is that states have jurisdiction over their Department of Children and Family Services, over public safety, over all of these different ways that trafficking has really woven itself into their community. And so by working alongside our attorney generals, we have the opportunity to make sure that we are partnering with, not just providing a solution, but coming along and saying, how do we really help make sure that you have not just the tools that you need, but the information at your fingertips to inform effective legislation, to help make sure that victims are receiving the best support that they need when they're identified, and strengthening that prosecution. As that data is aggregated and collected, then what we're going to see are what are those common trends in that state? Where are we seeing hotspots? And that's going to provide the dog.
That's my dog. That's my dog.
Your dog. Okay. We're going to be able to build intentional prevention models that really are targeted at that individual state. So the attorney generals, our state legislators are absolutely critical to helping just guide the response. And so we are just privileged to walk alongside so many states during this season.
Now that Zeke interrupted that conversation, I apologize.
It's all good.
We've been talking to Brittany Dunn, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Safe House Project. As we go to a break, I'd like to remind people in the audience that you can report suspected trafficking through Simply Report by downloading the Simply Report app or calling 833-5-BE-SAFE to connect with the Simply Report Survivor Support Team. We'll be right back after a short break. Please stay with us. We are back. I'm Chris Meek, host of Next Steps Forward. And my guest today is Brittany Dunn, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Safe House Project, a national leader working to eradicate human trafficking. Prior to Safe House Project, she spent 10 years in international business development at careerbuilder.com. Brittany earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics and English from Wellesley College and graduated top of her class with an MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management. She's also a military spouse, mom of two, lifelong learner, world traveler, and protector of the vulnerable. Brittany, when you were with us a few years ago, your husband was stationed in Virginia. I know that military families move around quite a bit. Are you still in Virginia today? And what's been happening in his career the past few years?
We are still in Virginia, but we're in our third house in Virginia since I was here in 22. So we've bounced around from Hampton Roads back up to the DC area, and it feels like everywhere in between. But no, we're excited. My husband just finished out his tour as the commanding officer of one of our helicopter squadrons in Hampton Roads. So he got to be one of the lucky ones who was on the USS Eisenhower for 10 months going up against Hamas and the Houthis in the most kinetic war since World War II. But now he's in a new venture with a different enemy, which is the United States Senate, where he is now the Navy's liaison for the Office of Legislative Affairs. And I say that tongue in cheek because he absolutely loves the work and being able to represent the Navy there. But it is definitely a transition to go from a bunch of sailors at 18 to 20 years old to Congress.
Duly noted, and I thank him for service and you for your service, but he may have bigger challenges ahead than versus Hamas. So I completely understand the tongue-in-cheek comment, and thank you for that. So that speaks to one of the unusual aspects of the Safe House Project, which is that it has thrived as to what you've described as an organization without walls. Has that organizational model changed or evolved, or is it still the right fit for your mission?
It has not changed, and it is absolutely the right fit. So we have a virtual remote team of over 30 people across the nation. And what is beautiful about that is we get to source just the best, most compassionate, empathetic, determined people from any community, as well as really being able to make sure that we're also being able to invest in survivors on our staff and having them have flexibility to meet some of their unique needs for employment. And so overall, it's truly been just a game changer for us as we remain agile and nimble. We always say we're a speedboat, not an aircraft carrier. So we let our husbands deal with aircraft carriers and we act more like, the Navy SEALs.
So you mentioned that there are survivors as part of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like for them, working with other survivors that are coming in and transitioning back into, I'll call it, for lack of a better phrase, mainstream society? Does that help them in their healing process? Do they go back and sort of have their own PTSD moments, a little bit of both?
It's always both. I mean, I think that even me not being a survivor, the vicarious trauma can seep in just as a result of the work. So we do a lot to cultivate psychological safety within our staff and well-being and invest in the people as much as those that we serve. But I also think that it is part of their healing journey so often to be able to make sure that they're adding their fingerprints to the solutions that we're creating to make sure that we are creating programs with them, not for them. And when we are co-creating and stress testing our opinions and coming at this, it's iron sharpens iron, and it produces the absolute best outcomes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And think about it in terms of the program and curriculum development. They're obviously going to be the ones that are going to tell you what works or doesn't work just from the experience. And so that's the best, I guess, curriculum development you could have for those incoming survivors. So kudos to you for having the survivors as part of the team. And so I just think that that's terrific. Putting the lens back on you for a moment, if we can, only about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 college students graduate with a double major. Usually economic students double major in things like mathematics, statistics, or even political science like myself, while English majors more commonly double major in education, journalism, or creative arts. How and why did you decide to combine economics and English? I hated English.
This is such a great question. And I should start with probably the words my father has been waiting 20 years to hear, which is that he was right and I was wrong, which is what every dad eventually wants to hear, because 25 years ago, we were sitting at a cafe and I told him I wanted to be an astrophysicist. None of the options that are currently on the table. And he said, I will not pay for your degree to be an astrophysicist. And I said, why? He goes, you just want to study the stars and go stargazing. And I was like, okay, that might actually be more accurate than anything else. But from there, no, I always had a love for business. From when I was young, I wanted to do international law, and then got into Wellesley and really saw where economics really is. It's the backbone of our nation. Like, whether we like it or not, we have to understand how economics drives decision-making, how it informs policy, where it intersects vulnerable populations. Whether we like it or not, it's truly a foundational element. But I also have always had a love for English and specifically women's British literature. And so I spent time at Oxford and studying over there. And so it just kind of combined my creative senses with that mathematical brain. And I am a weird breed, is what I've learned. I fit into nobody's box.
You're well balanced. It combines the left brain with the right brain.
There we go. I'll take it as well balanced, although I don't know if that's what everyone would say.
So sticking with the economics part for a second, you're a big believer in applying the data side to combating human trafficking. And is it fair to say that your background in economics influences that belief? And does it set you apart from people who take a more emotional approach to the issue?
Yes, I absolutely appreciate every one of the empaths on my team who are extremely compassionate and nurturing. But I think that for our organization specifically, combining that with data decision making and making sure that we are looking at how really trends and data aggregation and looking at how things evolve over time and the intersections. Like, we have to go to ecosystem thinking. We have to look at things through a larger lens, especially when you're dealing with a crime that thrives on legal industry. If this were happening in a vacuum, then of course, then we could sit there and just evaluate the emotional side and the health and human services side, but it doesn't. And we have to think of how our legislative framework is intersecting, how the economics of this flow, where is the finances coming from, how is the money being transferred, what are the dynamics? And I mean, that's not even in traditional means anymore. You look at cryptocurrencies and everything that's happening now, and we're playing the financial game on multiple levels. Obviously, societal trends. How does in the introduction of the cell phone and smart technology, cause an issue to really thrive? How is AI and deepfake technology going to change this landscape? All of that has to be captured from that quantitative side, but also that qualitative side. And when we can see how these play and the interoperability of systems and bring that all together, it really allows us to bring a more holistic and collective impact approach to I would claim, the largest criminal enterprise and biggest issue of our time.
Yeah, you mentioned about all of the trafficking, I'm sorry, the movement of the money and crypto and things like that. And you always hear or see on movies or drama shows, follow the money.
Mhm.
How do people follow the money in terms of human trafficking? Do you have any examples you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, there's big money and there's small money. Organized crime money, we see a lot of that coming right now out of the illicit massage businesses and Flushing, New York. And how is that tied into, that one does tie more back to our foreign nationals and China and different pieces like that. But then at a local level, when you see more of these familial trafficking cases, we're looking at Cash Apps, we're looking at Venmo and PayPal and things where it's never that pure monetary exchange. And so going back even to your question around why don't victims reach out and say, I'm a victim of human trafficking? Can you imagine being 8 years old? You're not necessarily seeing cash change hands. You're not seeing the actual financial transaction. And so when somebody says, has anybody paid to have sex with you for money, you might say no because you never saw the financial transaction. So we have to go deeper into understanding how the systems are working for payment and that exchange happening really completely in the digital space at this point.
That's incredible how things have changed like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. I never thought about that. Saying did you ever see somebody pay to have sex with you? And they could literally say no.
Right. And that changes the prosecution because the entire crime is predicated on the financial transaction.
The exchange, exactly.
So prosecutors have to be able to identify where was that change of something of monetary value. And that's what makes this extremely challenging. As much as people say, go after the bad guys, go after the bad guys, an investigator can have a lot of data and information, but unless they can prove the crime according to the code, they can't prosecute the crime of human trafficking. And so that goes back to why, again, data, technology, all of these systems working together to break it apart and see what's underneath are so critical, because right now, so much of this information is siloed. And until we can link that together, it makes it even more challenging to tackle.
And to your point now with cryptocurrencies and blockchain, it's that much more layered and harder to find. That's even scarier, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
And maybe sticking with the data in your economics background, have any new insights or actionable strategies emerged at Safe House Project as a result of your data-driven approach?
I mean, I think that Simply Report has been absolutely a game changer for us. That entire kind of framework is now allowing us to get insight into what are the key vulnerabilities that are currently being preyed on by traffickers, which apps are being used as the primary, modes for grooming and recruitment. We're seeing, greater insights into um, wide varieties of just trends across both the trafficker profile, but also the victim profile. And you have to look at those together. I think the other things that I'm personally excited about, and I use that term lightly, but is as we build these data ecosystems to have that interoperability working alongside industry, whether that's hotels or transportation, to start looking at additional data points that maybe aren't based on human observation, but more how many times is the door getting opened on the half hour within a hotel, or what is the payment process that's happening on the reservation. We look at, whether or not there's suspicious activity reports on financial systems. When you start linking that together, you look at license plate reading, all of this, and you really looked at the totality of circumstances, it's going to provide a much cleaner picture for us to evaluate how this is really transpiring in communities, both at that local level, but also at that macro level.
Another thing I never thought of, you just said, how many times the door opens in a hotel? I
Yep.
mean, wow. I mean, I guess I'm glad that those technologies exist, but that's also scary to think about that that's, ways of looking at this. You co-authored the book, Eradicating Human Trafficking, A Transformative Approach to Collective Impact, with your colleague and friend, Bill Wolf. Now, that's a pretty weighty and serious title. Is this intended for policymakers, law enforcement, academicians, or other professionals combating human trafficking? Or is it something that lay people should read?
Great question. I've had everybody read it, and it hits differently for each. It's less about the stories of survivors, although they're interwoven as it makes sense. But it's really a practical guide based on 7 pillars that we believe need to be present in order for a community or a state to take an effective approach to eradicating human trafficking. It also does it and lays it out in a phased approach so that it doesn't feel like you're biting off the entire elephant up front, but you're really parsing it into actionable steps. With that said, we have seen academics, policymakers, really grab hold of it, or those who have a strong lens into social reform, social justice, things of that nature. I am happy to share that we are creating a different version of it that will kind of speak to the community level and say, okay, here at the basis is ways that you can both learn, act, and share how human trafficking is embedded into your community in a way that might be more approachable for the everyday citizen. So we'll be looking forward to releasing that after the first of the year.
Terrific. And again, the title of the book is Eradicating Human Trafficking, A Transformative Approach to Collective Impact. Brittany, where can people find the book?
That's available at Amazon or at safehouseproject.org/eradicating human trafficking.
I'd like to say it'd be a great stocking stuffer, but might be a little bit heavy for the holidays. So maybe a January read.
January read, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We wrote it over Christmas, so we've already taken care of
All right, fair enough.
into that part of the holiday season.
Perfect. So, Brittany, just so people know that you're not all numbers and no emotions, you've also said that, quote, we create a stronger light by uniting many small lights. I love that.
Mhm.
Would you share a few stories that have really touched your heart in terms of how some small lights have come together to create a brighter impact?
Oh my goodness. Yes, always. I think that, yes, I want to focus a few obviously on the survivors that we get to serve, but also there's so many heroes in everyday community. Just recently, we had a nurse who had gotten trained using our healthcare training and really sought to understand the signs of trafficking in the clinical space. And when she had a young girl come into the pregnancy help organization that she works at, started to spot those signs of expected trafficking. And then she actually used Simply Report because she didn't feel confident to just jump in and ask the questions. And so she said, hey, what are some really good ways that I can help draw out whether or not what I'm seeing is actually trafficking? It provided those questions for her, validated the trafficking. And then from there, she was able to work with our survivor support team who helped get that young girl to safety, get her into a safe house program, and make sure that she was safe the entire way through. And so I think what that story highlights to me in so many ways is that it's somebody in the community noticing one small thing that truly puts somebody's life on a completely different trajectory. But even after that moment of identification, there's so many people that support a survivor of trafficking in that healing journey. It's the case managers, it's the victim advocates, it's the safe house program staff, and then it's the community that receives them at the other end that has made a space for them to come back and still heal in community. And I think that that's the power of collective impact. Is it's not an issue that's solved by one organization, by one individual, one policymaker, or one piece of data. It is truly the fact that when we recognize that people have value, dignity, and worth as a human being and not as a commodity, then it is all of us coming together and saying that we aren't going to tolerate this. We are done watching trafficking happen on our watch. And not only are we going to stop it before it starts, we're also right now in this season going to be a safe place for those who have experienced it to feel welcome, supported, and allow them that process of healing in healthy relationship.
We were talking about policy efforts being an essential part of your work. What specific federal and/or state legislation is Safe House Project advocating for or opposing right now? And what can our audience do to help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really excited to be at the American Legislative Exchange Council in Fort Worth last week, talking to over 1,200 policymakers about effective legislation. And so one of the things that we are currently working on is that we have some model legislation around human trafficking identification and reporting. And so, what this legislation seeks to do is to help strengthen those identification tools that are established within the states, but also making sure that as individuals are identified, that we have the protections for those survivors and we have the pathways for them to get into programs. And so, we're excited to see that start to move out and create impact. And then from there, we know that we're going to be able to kind of build those larger cases for support in order to mobilize greater funding for the entire anti-trafficking field. So right now, we're just encouraging people to either, you can reach out to me if you want to talk about how to talk to your representative if you have that relationship. But if you are just somebody who's like, I don't need to know much about it, I just want to support, just sending a note to your state representative and your state senators goes a long way to helping them hear that this is an issue that their constituents care about and want to see a response to.
And what's the Safe House Project website to reach out to you?
So it is safehouseproject.org, or my personal email is Brittany, Brittany, at safehouseproject.org.
Perfect. And one thing that's changed since the last time you were with us is that you became a member of the very, very prestigious Forbes Nonprofit Council. How did that come about, and how's that role benefited your work at Safe House Project? And by the way, congratulations. That's a huge, huge deal.
Well, thank you. Luckily, we have some incredible board members who always come up with great connections and great ways to help just continue to extend the work. But I think that what I've enjoyed about being part of the Forbes Nonprofit Business Council is the opportunity to provide thought leadership and do it in ways that kind of break down this big issue into bite-sized chunks that people can understand, but also that pushes us forward. I'm not looking to regurgitate what other people are saying, but bring new ideas and then stress test them. That's what I love. I love when people push back. I love when people challenge. I love when we get to have that constructive discourse that moves us closer to true solutions that really can protect survivors, prosecute traffickers and buyers, and really prevent trafficking.
Something that you've consistently said is we have to be, quote, as clever and creative as the traffickers themselves to stop trafficking or identify people in trafficking situations. An especially clever tactic you've employed is involving pest management professionals and combating human trafficking. How does that work? And have you enlisted other industry professionals in that effort?
Yeah. So, yes, it's always about getting creative. In 2020, when kids were sheltering in place and our traditional safety nets, like educators, weren't being able to see these kids on a regular basis, it was absolutely critical that we found a way to create eyes into the homes. And the best way to do that was through the pest management industry that goes into 20 to 30% of households on an annual basis. And so they were able to get in there and start to spot signs of child trafficking, child sexual abuse material creation, and just the testimonies that rolled out of those trainings and then subsequent identifications truly revolutionized how we were thinking about training and who we needed to equip. There are some very obvious ones in this work, but there's a lot of have other opportunities to be part of it. So we've expanded that out to HVAC and plumbers and all of your in-home service providers. But that goes for real estate agents. It goes for anybody who's truly just interacting in the community and seeing the cross section of the population that we all get to work in every single day. And so I think that we just always seek to stay at the tip of the spear to make sure we're providing the most actionable information and resources to the community for them to feel truly equipped to respond to this issue.
And I know that I've seen a few articles on the airline industry as well,
Mm-hmm.
teaching their staff and employees as well. So that's great to see.
Yeah, our mini documentary will be in the back of Delta starting in January as well.
And they were the airlines that I saw who did the most, but they're not a sponsor of the show yet. So I didn't want to say the name, but that's okay that you did. So maybe you can send them my way next time.
I'll send them your way.
Perfect. Brittany, we're almost at the end of our conversation. How can people, you mentioned how people get in touch with you in the Safe House Project, but more importantly, how can they donate or volunteer?
Yeah. So you can always go to safehouseproject.org/donate. And we greatly appreciate it. Every day, these victims reach out, and we always say that hope without resources is cruel. And so it is absolutely vital that we have the resources to provide them when they have that 10 seconds of insane courage to reach out and get them to safety. So every dollar really matters, and we greatly appreciate that support. But in addition, be an ambassador into your community. We have so many different Simply Report ambassadors mobilizing across the country that are taking the message of our On Watch training and Simply Report platform to schools, to their community, to the teams that they coach. And so we have a lot of different ways to activate you right where you are. And all you need to do is go to safehouseproject.org to our contact us page, fill it out, and a member of our staff will get in touch and get you going.
And as I said earlier, you can report suspected trafficking through Simply Report by downloading the Simply Report app or calling 833-5BE safe to connect with the Simply Report Survivor Support Team. Brittany Dunn in the Safe House Project, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, more importantly, for the very, very important work that you do.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
No, it was great seeing you. Thanks again for your time. I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.